Okay.
Well, good evening, parents and students, and we are so excited to have you in our virtual meeting for reentry on today. So much has been going on, so much has been changing information, and so we definitely want to help you understand the context of what this means for JPF. I want to call out one thing before the meeting gets started. School would not be the same as it has been heretofore pre-COVID. I just got to call that out. Schools were not meant to be places where we can socially distance. School buildings were built and designed on the premise that we get lots of people in spaces where we can interact and collaborate. So this is a challenge. And so with that being said, I want to make sure I call out one thing and make this so important. Safety is our number one priority. And it has to be. And because safety is that number one priority, things are going to look a lot different. And so as we share the information today, you will be allowed to use the chat box feature because this is designed not to have people coming in to talk over the presentation. We want everyone to really take in the information, process it, synthesize it, and then we can come back and talk about whatever clarifying questions you may have. Currently right now, we have about 30 parents in attendance, and so this is specifically the meeting for elementary. So any student in grades kindergarten through 5th grade, this is who this meeting is meant for, and their parents. If you have a 6th to 8th grader, tonight is not your night. That night will be on Thursday at the same time, which will be at 5:30 p.m. So at this time, we have a great team who's getting ready to take you a little further in the presentation. We don't want to belabor this, and we don't want to keep you all night. We know you still have to feed the kiddos and everything else with board water advisories and everything that we got going. And so we do understand the time consciousness and the need for brevity. But being very concise in the information that we'll be sharing. So at this time, I'm getting ready to turn it over to our awesome assistant principals, Ms. Woodis and Ms. Watkins. They will take you to the next level in terms of how the presentation will go. At some point in time, we're gonna have our Wiz PTO president, Ms. Beverly Davis. She will be joining us. Currently right now, she's having some technical issues getting in. But when she comes, we'll be glad to allow her to address the august body that we have joined with us in this virtual platform meeting tonight. Ms. Woodis, are you all ready?
Yes, sir, we are ready.
All right.
Good evening, Panther family. We are here to discuss the student reentry meeting for parents. The purpose of this meeting is just to give you a general overview of the student reentry protocol and expectations for March 2021 at John P. Freeman. Our elementary students will return March 1st, 2020, kindergarten through 5th grade, and our middle school students will return March the 8th. That's our 6th through 8th grade. We will return to our regular bell schedule time during that time. We know that the coronavirus pandemic has changed how we see the world. However, we know that we have to continue to keep our students safe, teach them, and provide social and emotional support through this incredible time. We have decided to re-enter our building and serve our students who have opted for in-person learning while continuing virtual instruction. Our district is committed to providing the best learning experiences for our students. As we look forward to implementing the plan for the rapidly approaching phased return to in-person classes in March, we must garner our resources and efforts to continue providing high-quality learning options for our students. This reentry plan will begin with students who chose the in-person learning option. In this presentation and what you can expect when schools reopen, we have a safety protocols that all students must follow. Students will utilize their student devices and social distancing when possible. There will still be high quality instruction, and there is still a focus on social emotional support for our students. One thing that you will see is that we have enhanced health and safety protocols. There will be increased cleaning. All common areas will be thoroughly cleaned and disinfected at least twice per day. Thorough cleaning and disinfection of all frequently touched areas at least 4 times per day. There will be a daily restocking of tissue, paper towels, hand soap, and hand sanitizer dispensers. Safeguards to limited spreading of germs. We will have temperature and health monitoring for all students, staff, and visitors. Those with a fever or symptoms will not be allowed to remain at school or work. Isolation areas are designated for individuals with symptoms. Social distancing markers are in and around buildings. We will reduce class transitions and reduce visitor volume. Limited class interaction and gatherings. Hand sanitizing stations in all common areas and hallways, and frequent opportunities for hand washing for students and staff. Use of the PPE equipment, that's the personal protective equipment. Face masks will be required for students, staff, and visitors, as well as all buildings will be equipped with an emergency stock of PPE gear. Health and safety signage in all buildings. Social distancing floor decals, visitors entry guidelines and mask requirements, hand washing steps to avoid germs, and stay at home when you are sick. Here, parents, what you see is an example of what classes will look like. Both of these are elementary classes. Each student's desk is equipped with a partition to protect them and still be able to view what's going on in the classroom. And again, we will be social distancing when possible. We will conduct temperature checks. Teachers and school staff will conduct temperature checks. Upon entering the building, students will stop at the temperature sanitizing stations to have their temperature taken and sanitize their hands before heading to class. Students found having an elevated temp upon first reading will undergo a second reading before being sent to our safety room. When students arrive, this is for car riders, walkers, students who may ride their bikes to school, daycare riders, and students who are driven by car to school. Parents, we're asking that you check your students' temperature before leaving home. Also, parents, as much as we know you would like to see your students off to class, parents will not be permitted to walk their students to classes. At 7:45, students will enter the building on the east parking lot near the cafeteria and the south parking lot near the tennis courts. Students will be required to wear masks before entering the building. Students must stand 6 feet while waiting to enter the building according to the school procedures. Upon arrival, students will undergo temperature checks at the school. If a student is found to have an elevated reading after 2 checks, they will be escorted to the safe room and parents will be contacted to pick up their child. Students will be dismissed according to the school's procedures. Recess and brain breaks. Every effort will be made for students to have recess with their class cohort while engaging in some degree of physical distancing. Teachers will plan recess or brain break activities around the instructional schedule. Virtual students will take breaks at the same time as in-person students. Students will sanitize their hands before and after brain breaks. However, students will not be allowed to use playground equipment. At the close of the school day, teachers and students will disinfect classroom supplies and materials. Students will not use lockers at this time until further notice. Class dismissals and end-of-day dismissals will be scheduled on a staggered basis and will include the 6 feet social distancing protocol. Restroom breaks, lunch breaks, recess, co-curricular activities will be scheduled on a staggered basis and will be aligned with the most current CDC and Shelby County Health Department guidelines. School meals. You can expect a combination of grab-and-go meals, shorter periods, and lunch consumed in the classroom. For breakfast, all students will participate in the grab-and-go breakfast. Students will pick up their breakfast after temperature screening and head to homeroom to eat breakfast in the classroom. For lunch, students in kindergarten through 2nd grade will eat lunch in the classroom, and students in grades 3 through 8 will eat lunch in the cafeteria at staggered times. Students will have assigned seating in the cafeteria daily. When feasible, there will be normal operations with social distancing. Virtual parents will still be able to pick up meals at school sites at designated times. For dismissal, parents will not be allowed to enter the building to pick up their students. Dismissal begins at 3:10 p.m. Elementary students will dismiss on the east parking lot near the cafeteria, and middle school students and siblings will dismiss on the south parking lot near the tennis courts. Students will depart the school building at exits specified by school personnel. Students will be required to wear a mask as they exit the building to their awaiting cars and parents. Walkers will walk home. Parents will not be allowed to exit their cars or gather in groups while waiting for students to dismiss. Daycare riders will be dismissed based on the school's protocol. Classroom operations before and after care. This year, we will participate in the YMCA's program that is called Y-Care. The Y-Care programs will resume and follow the CDC and Shelby County Health Department guidelines. The Y-Care hours of operation are 6:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. Teachers and students will sanitize their hands prior to entering and leaving the classroom and practice physical distancing when feasible. Small groups should include no more than 2 to 3 students. Teachers and students are required to wear face masks or face shields. All PPE must be always worn properly. Before and after care programs will begin operations on the students' first day back to school, March 1st for elementary and March 8th for middle school. Please note, parents, if you are interested in the before and after care program, you must visit the YMCA's website. Registration is open and will remain open until spaces are filled. Parents, you can go to www.ymca.org/SES-BASC, or you can contact Shauna Bateman with the number that's provided. Parents can register students by calling the main office of their child assigned school and have their child's name added to the list as space is available. Enrollment is open until spaces are filled. And parents, this again is the website that you would go to register for before and after care.
Good evening, parents and students. Some additional information for you. All school bell times will return to their original times for both in-person and virtual learning. So John P. Freeman's bell time is 8:15 until 3:15. Students will be required to wear uniforms during virtual learning. All in-person learners will be required to follow the Shelby County Schools Board policy on uniforms. Next slide. I'm sorry, go back, Ms. Woodis, thank you. We wanted to give you some information regarding the uniforms that are required for those students who are returning in person. So what you see before you now is the uniform policy for John P. Freeman. Basic uniform colors for pants, shirts, shorts, skirts, and jumpers are tan and khaki, navy blue, and black. And then shirts must have a collar. They could be a polo, could be a dress, turtleneck, and must be a solid color of any shade of blue or white. Light jackets, vests, sweaters, sweatshirts, and cardigans must be tan or khaki, white, navy blue, or black. And shoes may not have heels higher than 1.5 inches. Shoes with rollers and wheels are prohibited. And athletic shoes, sandals with straps on the heel, and boots are permitted. T-shirts may be worn as undergarments and must be solid white. Next slide. Instructional spaces. The following spaces will be used for student instruction. We'll use the gym, cafeteria, library, multipurpose room, and classrooms. Here you see an example of an instructional space. And you see that the barriers have been put in place for safety. Next slide. Classroom instruction. Next slide. All pre-K to 12 students will engage in asynchronous learning this week. Students will engage in asynchronous learning on the following days as teachers help in-person students learn routines and procedures at school. So pre-K through 5 students will have asynchronous learning March 1st and 2nd, and then 6 through 12 students will have asynchronous learning March 8th through the 9th. And again, this is to give the teachers time to get the students who are in person acclimated to routines and procedures. All bell times will return to their original times for both in-person and virtual learning on March 1st, 2021. And those bell times again are 8:15 until 3:15. Students will not be required to wear uniforms during virtual learning. Again, students will not be required to wear uniforms during virtual learning. All in-person learners will be required to follow Shelby County Schools Board policy on uniforms. Next slide. Student devices and classroom instruction. Students will bring their fully charged Shelby County Schools devices and power cords daily. Be sure to label your child's device and cord. That's very important. Students will bring their cleaned and disinfected headsets daily. Instructional content and curriculum will remain the same, and students with individual instructional technology needs will be assisted as needed. Next slide. Sharing of supplies. Students are not allowed to share school supplies nor share classroom storage spaces. Students will need to bring their own school supplies. Students will not use school lockers to store personal items until further notice. All books, supplies, and lunch items must fit in the students' backpacks. Next slide. Virtual day attendance processes will be followed. Teachers will call roll using Microsoft Teams and record attendance in PowerSchool within the first 15 minutes of every class period. If your child is experiencing technical issues, notify the school immediately. Next slide. Instructional components, delivery. Regular instruction will occur parallel to distance and in-person learning with social distancing when feasible. Teachers will use Teams. Quarantined and sick students will receive distance learning instruction. Next slide. So here you see the day in the life of simulation for a teacher. And this is giving information about what whole group synchronous via Teams will look like, small group synchronous via Teams, what that could look like, and asynchronous via Teams. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about that. First of all, whole group synchronous. Teacher actions for all students. Teacher live delivery will be streamed on Teams. Teacher must stay within a 6 feet radius of his or her digital device. So there'll be a command station in order for home learners to hear the teacher's instruction clearly. Teacher must plan to engage in person and virtual students equally, referencing the PLC guide. Teachers will need to set up a device to view at all times, all students in person and online, the digital content being displayed and Teams chat when appropriate. Teacher stands in the classroom while being viewed on camera to welcome students, check attendance, and conduct SEL activity on the Teams platform. Teacher reviews hybrid learning classroom expectations whenever appropriate, like raising your hand, submitting assignments, asking questions. Teacher displays Do Now in Teams. Teacher must communicate expectations for the completion of the assignment. Teacher or students discuss answers to the Do Now, and all teachers will administer the instructional practices 1 through 4 during the delivery of instruction. Next slide. Small group synchronous. Teacher actions for all students. Again, teacher live delivery will be streamed on Teams during small group. Teacher workspace must allow teachers to work on digital device while monitoring in-person asynchronous activities. Teacher reviews asynchronous classroom expectations whenever appropriate, like asking questions and accessing materials. Teacher reviews small group protocols, schedule, rotations. Teacher must plan for the teacher-led small group lessons and asynchronous assignments. Teacher assigns differentiated small group activities based on individual learning needs. Teacher implements small group lesson for differentiated reteaching, and teacher monitors all students to ensure mastery and engagement. Next slide. Asynchronous. Teacher assigns and monitors work for students to complete independently during instructional block as well as in designated school-wide asynchronous times. Examples include, but aren't limited to, projects, presentations, enrichment packets, practice pages, review video lessons, iReady, Florida Virtual School, Edgenuity, Naviance, grade recovery assignments, and exit tickets. Next slide. Classroom monitors and subs. The primary task of classroom monitors and subs is to support students in the classroom. However, they should be prepared to perform other duties as assigned by the principal. Teacher-specific and school-wide support include, but are not limited to, assisting with monitoring and supervising students during school opening, throughout the school day and during dismissal, assisting with taking attendance, helping students troubleshoot issues with devices, helping to monitor students during breaks, answering students' questions, assisting with monitoring students' grades, observing and reporting behaviors of students that would impact the well-being of others, and informing the appropriate school administrator and/or security personnel when emergencies or questions arise. Next slide. So here you have a skeletal schedule of a day in the life of an elementary school during COVID-19. So our student here, let's call her Angela. From 8 to 8:15, Angela's going to travel to school. From 8 to 8:15, she'll enter the building and get her temperature checked at the front door with her mask on. Angela will then proceed to a designated area to eat breakfast. For us, it will be the classroom. School will practice social distancing to the extent possible. From 8:15 to 11 o'clock, Angela will wash her hands before entering the room. She'll enter the classroom and find her seat for instruction. She'll wear her mask. She'll receive instruction from her teacher with headsets on, and she signs into teams. Teacher may be teaching in person or teacher will be teaching in person. The students will sign into teams. And then Angela will receive synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Throughout the morning instruction, Angela will go to the restroom to wash hands. From 11 to 11:30, Angela washes hands and eats lunch in the classroom or designated area. After lunch, Angela washes hands and returns to the classroom. 11:30 to 3:30, Angela will sign back onto Teams with her teacher, and she'll return to class for afternoon classes. At 3:10, Angela will prepare to go home and exit the building. Next slide. What you see here on this slide is what I just kind of went through with you, a day in the life of an elementary school student during COVID-19. This is just a graphic that shows you basically the same information. At this time, our next presenter is Ms. Thompson.
Good afternoon, parents. So this is the day in life of a middle school student during COVID-19. Angela travels to school, either walking her siblings to school or being dropped off by the daycare or bus, and Angela is wearing a mask, and she waits outside for the school to open and enter. From 8 o'clock to 8:15, Angela enters the building. She gets her temperature checked at the front door with her mask on. Angela proceeds to the designated area to eat breakfast, whether it's the classroom or cafeteria. School will practice social distancing to the extent possible. Angela will wash her hands after eating and before going to class, which will be monitored by adults who don't have a home room. From 8:15 to 11, Angela enters the classroom. She finds her seat for instruction. She's still wearing her mask. Angela receives instruction from her teacher with her headsets on, and she signs on to Teams. Angela will receive synchronous and asynchronous instruction throughout the morning, which will be approximately 45 to 50 minutes per class period. From 11 o'clock to 11:30, Angela goes to lunch. She eats, comes back to the classroom, washes her hands, and returns to class. From 11:30 to 3, Angela signs back on to Teams with her teacher. This may be in person or virtual. Angela will go to the restroom to wash her hands between class transitions or as needed. Angela returns to class for afternoon classes. Recess, outside breaks will be incorporated into the school day. And at 3:10, Angela prepares to go home and exit the building. Angela travels home after either picking up her siblings up from school or being dropped off by car. And this is just an example of everything that I went over. They list the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, this is a student that's working virtually. Karen logs on to her virtual class. She receives instruction from her teacher via Teams. Karen receives synchronous and asynchronous instruction. She takes stretch breaks between her morning class transition. From 11 to 11:30, she eats a healthy lunch. At 11:30 to 3 o'clock, she logs back on to her virtual class. She receives instruction from her teacher via Teams, and she receives synchronous or asynchronous instruction. And at 3 o'clock, school is out for Karen and she is free to enjoy her afternoon. And this is also a chart of everything that I just went on from the time she got up at 6:30 until the end of the school day at 3 o'clock. Also, this is a student working virtually as well. Melissa logs on to Teams. She receives instruction from her Teams teacher. She switches between classes according to her schedule. She receives synchronous and asynchronous instruction. She takes stretch breaks during her class transition. She eats a healthy lunch from 11 to 11:30. 11:30 to 3:10, she logs back on to Teams. She receives instruction from her teachers via Team. She switches between classes according to her schedule. She receives synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Melissa takes stretch breaks during class transitions, and at 3:10, she is out and Melissa is free to enjoy her afternoon. This is also a chart of everything I just told you about Melissa. Social and emotional learning, 2020-21 implementation. So we have the virtual portion and we have the in-person portion. So the SRT and virtual check-in with Tier 2 students, parents, and staff classroom guidance. There will be virtual meetings with the mental health clinicians, social workers, Bright Bite, referrals, individuals with group counseling, provide virtual students behavior intervention with Tier 1, early Tier 2 levels, investigating cyberbullying, complaints, state process, social emotional support lines, teletherapy, grief, crisis counseling, virtual services with parental consent to new and existing students and new Tier 3 students. They're going to have a reset room operating support intervention through MS Teams to include student attendance, student search, chronic absenteeism, and trauma sensitivity. Virtual SEL PD consultation sessions, SEL curriculum pilot, and district planning, providing registration, enrollment, homeless, truancy, discipline, behavior, restoration practice, chronic absenteeism, homebound, custody, POA, and support. And that's all for virtual. For in-person, they're going to resume in-person SRT check-in with Tier 2 students and parents and staff, meet with the mental health, social worker, Bright Bite, referrals groups, individual counseling for students, district and school PDs, consultation sessions, provide virtual behavior intervention at the Tier 1 and early Tier 2 levels, and investigating bully complaints and state process, social emotional support lines in person, teletherapy, grief, crisis counseling, can be in Tier 2 and 3 services with parental consent to new and existing students and new Tier 3 students, reset room operating in person at all 30 sites, reset assistant present at school and available during school hours, support students impacted by the pandemic and or SEL competence needs. SEL curriculum pilot, PD, and planning for district-wide implementation of the 2021-2022 school year. Also providing registration and enrollment, homeless, truancy, discipline, behavior, restoration practice, chronic absenteeism, homebound, custody, and POA support. So we have been over this, so I'm gonna read a couple of them. Enhancing the health and safety protocol. So all common areas will be thoroughly cleaned and disinfected twice per day. Thoroughly cleaning and disinfection is all frequently touched areas at least 4 times a day. They're going to restock all of the tissue paper towels, hand soap, hand sanitizer dispensers. The safeguard to limit the spread of germs, temperature, and health monitoring of all students, staff, and visitors. Those with a fever or symptoms will not be allowed to remain at school/work. There will be an isolation area designated for the individual with symptoms, social distancing markers in all buildings, reduce class transition, reduce visitor volume, limiting class interaction and gatherings, hand sanitizer stations in all common areas and hallways, frequently opportunities to wash your hands, use of personal protective equipment, the PPE gear, face mask requirement for students, staff, visitors will be based on current guidance from the Center of Disease Control and Shelby County Health Department and the local government ordinances. All buildings will be equipped with emergency stock of the PPE. Health and safety signature in all buildings, social distancing floor decals, visitors entering guidelines and mask requirements, hand washing steps to avoid germs, and the stay home when sick policy. For reporting cases of COVID-19, protocols and procedures. So in preparation for reopening of the school for in-person learning, Shelby County Schools has implemented extensive procedures to address positive cases of COVID-19. This process includes investigating schools and implementing a plan of action to protect students and employees of SCX, follows all appropriate protocols for reporting cases based on Shelby County Health Department guidance. So, self-reporting for families and staff. Parent and guardian of employees self-reports positive case to the school principal or the site administrator. The principal and the site administration then notify the SCS contact tracing team, and they initiate the in-school contact tracing. Then the SCS contact tracing team reports the case to SCHD to implement immigrating strategies. So to report a case or ask questions about the contact tracing, parents should contact their child's school during regular hours. So before day one, procedures and protocols for the principal. So before day one, the principal and staff will prepare the building and the classroom for re-entry. Maintaining CDC guidelines, the principal will meet with COVID task force, technology coordinators, and the MIE ambassadors. The principal will review re-entry plans and meet with the building engineer to inspect the building. The principal will meet with the teachers and staff to share the re-entry protocol. The principal will create schedules for teachers to prepare and set up classrooms for re-entry. The principal will create a hybrid schedule for instruction, including homeroom schedules and rosters. The principals will meet with parents and share specific re-entry plans for their school. And the principal and staff will practice arrival and dismissal procedures for students. And the principals will create a PowerPoint for teachers to share with students on day one, outlining systems, routines, expectations that align to both the school and the CDC guidelines. And so day one, the principal will hold the brief morning huddle virtually to review expectations. For day one, the principal and the task force will monitor the students' arrival. They will take temperatures, hand sanitizing, building transition. The principal will designate specific team members to monitor and assist late arrivals. The principal and the SMS coordinators will track students' attendance both virtually and in person. The principal will ensure teachers share PowerPoints with students that outline systems, routines, and expectations that align to both school and the CDC guidelines. The principal and staff will practice arrival and dismissal procedures and building transition, hallways, break, lunch, and restroom with student and staff. Principal will designate student space for all personal belongings. Principals will ensure teachers create asynchronous assignments for students who are not working remotely, and in-person students will practice the school-wide procedures. Principal will use the Teams platform to monitor both the hybrid and in-person instruction for evidence of instructional practice 1 through 4. Principal will ensure technology coordinator assists students, parents, and teachers in troubleshooting minor technology needs. The principal will monitor digital engagement in Power BI. The principal will dismiss students from the school according to their re-entry plan. The principal will hold a brief afternoon huddle virtually with school staff to share goals and growth and determine needed adjustments. Athletics. So the goals is to keep our athletes and coaches safe, to prevent and contain the spread of COVID-19, To review opportunities for athletes and coaches to safely practice and compete during the spring sports session. To review critical factors involved in contest management. To train the appropriate staff to be able to implement the CDC and the NFHS guidelines for practicing social distancing and returning to athletic play. Further guidance for practice and return to play will be provided by the school principal and the athletic director soon. Safe room protocols. So individuals who present infectious symptoms will need to be evaluated and isolated for a short period of time in the school designated safe room until the person has been dismissed. The school safe room checklist is a list of recommended measures on how to approach possibly effective faculty, staff, and students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Safe room protocols. Establish the room to be used as a safe room and set up the room. When feasible, the room should be near a dedicated restroom that is only used by the person in the safe room. When feasible, there should be an outdoor access door to retrieve of faculty, staff, students without contaminating additional school areas. Seating should be 6 feet apart. Ensure proper signage is posted. Designating a staff person will be responsible for reporting to COVID-19 concerns and will help coordinate the local health authorities regarding positive COVID-19 cases. Identify the safe room symptoms, monitor, and develop a schedule to ensure monitoring at all times. So train the designated staff and safe room monitors on how to recognize if a student, faculty, or staff member shows symptoms of an infectious disease while at school. Training will provide a clear understanding of the following: ensuring confidentiality and the importance of not sharing personal protected health information, HIPAA, how to perform temperature checks using the infrared thermometer, how the infection spread, how to identify infectious symptoms, how to protect themselves using the PPE gear, the importance of social distancing, environmental cleaning and disinfecting procedures, when to contact the parents and or guardian, and when to contact health services. Also, continue with the safe room protocols. The principal should share the following information with stakeholders. Allow systematic faculty, staff, and students to wait in the safe room. Ensure that anyone entering the safe room maintain and use their appropriate PPE gear and follow safety guidelines. Complete the appropriate incident form for anyone entering the safe room and maintain electronic log. The parent and guardian would immediately be notified of the status of the systematic student upon the student's entry into the safe room. Ask the parent or guardian to immediately pick up the student from school and seek medical attention. Follow emergency medical protocol if conditions warrant. Ask the parent or guardian to provide medical clearance from a provider before the student can return to school. Please do not place face covering, surgical masks on anyone who is unconscious or has trouble breathing, who is incapacitated or otherwise unable to remove the face covering without assistance, or who cannot tolerate a face covering due to the developmental, medical, or behavioral health needs. Disinfecting the safe room. The principal or designee monitor symptoms and follow these actions after an individual is admitted to the safe room. They're going to notify the custodian staff once the faculty, the staff, and or student has vacated the area or the room. Custodian staff will clean and disinfect the area of the room once the faculty, staff, or students have vacated the area of the room. If additional guidance is needed, please contact the Department of Exceptional Children and Health Services at 901-416-2424. They will provide specific health guidelines and follow-up instructions, including approved parent communication when necessary based on the Shelby County Health Department recommendations and or our communications team. Ms. Mitchell.
Good afternoon, parents. Exceptional Children and Health Services Reentry Plan. Next slide. Reentry support for teachers and teacher assistants, TAs. Face-to-face support will be provided weekly to SPED teachers and SPED TAs in each class by DECHS Central Office staff. Advisors will share contact information, phone number, email address, etc., with all SPED teachers and SPED teacher assistants. Central Office SPED staff will be deployed to assigned schools. Behavior consultants will be assigned to classes with students requiring behavior and social emotional support. Collaboration of DECHS Central Office staff with school administration to determine specific areas of need for SPED teachers and SPED TAs. Virtual IEP support. SPED managers and advisors have served as LEAs during virtual IEP meetings and consistently monitored the progress of students with IEPs. A virtual IEP meeting guide was developed and shared with SPED teachers receiving training. DECHS acquired a DocuSign contract to provide all staff with an account to obtain signatures for virtual IEP meetings. Teachers of low incidence self-contained classes received additional funding to provide learning boxes with instructional materials, supplies, and manipulatives to use as a supplement to their virtual instruction. School nurses have participated in IEP meetings and provided virtual services for students with disabilities who have individual healthcare plans. Exceptional students return to the building and social distancing guidelines. Advisors will visit classrooms, check for proper spacing, and work with school administration to ensure social distancing guidelines from the district are being followed. Safety in the classrooms. Additional PPE will be made available to staff in classrooms with students who have unpredictable behaviors, are medically fragile, and or physically impaired. Ongoing collaboration regarding specific seating plans and safety/PPE protocol developed by transportation. These guidelines will be followed. SPED staff will assist in guiding students to the school's COVID-19 screening checkpoint after exiting the bus. CLUE services. Our CLUE students will be served in their assigned schools and will not travel to CLUE centers. The CLUE teachers will travel instead to those students who have chosen to attend school in person and use the virtual Teams platform for students at the school who have remained virtual. At this time, transportation will not be needed. Updating student learning option for return to in-person learning. This, parents, is basically the protocol that you will follow if you want to change your student from in-person to virtual or virtual to in-person. At the top, parents can visit PowerSchool Parent Portal to change/update their student learning option and staff will assist them. They can call. Parents can also call the school to change or update their child's learning option and the staff will assist them. School will complete form with parent over the phone or in person. School will enter information in PowerSchool to update the student learning option. Entry of data in PowerSchool is the critical step in the process. The next step, if needed, school staff can have a full day to complete the data entry process and plan for the student's return to in-person learning. The parent should be informed of the date the student will attend in person by school. For PowerSchool enrollment questions or support with the student learning options, please contact the SEED office at 416-6007. SES returns stronger to in-person learning form. This is just what it looks like. At the top, you've got the in-person return dates. And then the next, March 1st, that's going to be, as said earlier, grades K through 5. March the 8th, grades 6 through 12. You've got student name. You will need the student's PowerSchool number and, of course, the school name. And then the parent will complete the information below. Does your child receive special ed services, IEP, yes or no? Is your child eligible for transportation services, yes or no? Update the learning option choice. This is the critical step. So if you want your child to be option 1 in school, you would check there. Option 2, which would be virtual, you would select that. And then last, I understand by selecting the above learning option, my child will remain either in person or virtual for the remainder of the 2021 school year. If the parent is completing this process by phone, the school staff must read this statement to the parent. And then lastly, you will go ahead and sign the form. Okay, for parents visiting the school to change the learning option, verify identification and proceed with the following. Verify parent/legal guardian is listed in PowerSchool on the contact page. Ask the parent to verify the student's PS number, PowerSchool number, or last 4 digits of the Social Security number. Ask parent to verify the date of birth. Ask parent to verify the address on file. For parents calling the school to change the learning option, verify the following. So we'll ask for the parent to verify the legal guardian is listed in PowerSchool on the contact page. Ask the parent to verify student's PowerSchool number or the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. Ask the parent to verify the date of birth, and ask the parent to verify the address on file. Next. The coronavirus will not defeat us. Memphis has seen its share of epidemics and pandemics. The cholera epidemic of 1873, these are just a few. Yellow fever of 1878. The Great Influenza Pandemic of 1918. They were eventually conquered by public health initiatives and a vaccine. The aftermath, however, gifted our city with the determination, the grit, the endurance, and a strong sense of community that defines us today. There is comfort in knowing Memphis has seen worse and not only survived, but thrived. Frequently asked questions. Okay, so the return to school documentation for positive and close contact. Will the students need a clearance letter to return? Any student who tested positive will need a clearance letter from the student's doctor on one of the SES school-based healthcare centers or one of the SES school-based healthcare centers. Include the link to the SES school-based centers. Okay. Also, close contacts do not need any documentation. Students do not need a negative test result to return to school. Clarification, any student who cannot return to the school for a period of time required will be expected to attend class virtually. The student will be coded CVB. If the student is sick to attend virtually, the student will be coded CVA. If the student is sick for an extended length of time, SEED should be contacted for potential homebound services, and the student should be coded CVH8 if homebound services are provided. COVID-19 positive. What is considered a valid clearance documentation to return to the school building? A clearance letter or documentation from the child's doctor or one or more of the SES school-based health clinics containing a clearance date would be considered a valid clearance document for the child to return. A negative test result is not required to return to school. Close contact. What constitutes a close contact based on district protocol? A close contact per health department is within 6 feet, 15 minutes or longer. However, the district team will determine who those contacts are. No one at the school will have to determine a close contact. If a student is positive at school, the tracing team will determine close contact. And if a parent calls and states their child is a close contact, we take them at their word. Are close contacts not required to be tested? That is correct. Close contacts are not required to be tested. If a child is determined as a close contact, they must quarantine, correct? Correct. The student who is determined to be a close contact will need to stay home for the length of required by the CDC Health Department. Who determines the length of the quarantine period? The length of the time a student must remain out of school is 10 days from the last contact with the person who tested positive. Will they be required to get tested? As we know, symptoms often don't show in children. A student who is a close contact does not need to be tested. So, what is the documentation that will indicate that they are safe to be at school? And that last part I cannot read. I apologize, I couldn't read that last portion. Frequently asked questions are continued here. Symptomatic students, flu-like. When are students put in the safe room? A student is put in the safe room when the student answers yes to the questions on the evaluation tool or those symptoms are observed. If and when are parents contacted to pick up the child? The parent should be notified to pick up the student immediately upon placement in the safe room. Will the child attend virtually from home? Yes, the student should attend school virtually until the student returns to school. Will regular attendance coding apply? If the student obtains a clearance letter immediately, regular attendance codes will be used. If the student is isolated at home for the 10 days, the COVID code will be used. If students are excluded, how long will the period be? The student will need to stay at home until the student obtains a clearance letter. Is any documentation needed for the student to return to school? The student will need a clearance letter to return. What, if anything, is needed for a sick child to come back to school? The student who is placed in the safe room will need a clearance letter. The student who is sick but not exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms, not placed in the safe room, will not need a letter to return. What about sick bus riders? Well, that doesn't necessarily apply to us, except for daycare. A student who gets sick on the bus will move to the designated safe area in the back of the bus. Once at school, administration will be notified and school COVID-19 protocol will be followed. What if parents do not pick up their child from the isolation room? Involvement, DCS, and local law enforcement may be necessary. Staff members who are close contact. If an employee comes into contact with a student who is suspected as being positive, do they quarantine? In addition, with limited staff in the building, if the child comes in contact with several employees, do they all need to be quarantined? Upon confirmed positive results, the district tracing team would work with school leaders to identify the close contact. If the tracing team determines several employees are close contacts, they would all need to stay home. Are close contacts not required to be tested? That is correct. Who's responsible for providing clearance letters, SCS Clinic or the health department? You can have them call the SCS Clinic at 416-6079 and schedule a clearance appointment. If a student informs us that they are positive, do we notify the classroom monitor? The district tracing team will notify any employees and the principal will notify any students. You should complete the form to report it to the tracing team. That team will investigate and notify the principal or the close contacts, and at that time, the principal will notify those persons. Frequently asked questions continued. Many parents can't remember their child's selected learning option. Is there a quick way to inform parents of the option they selected? Remind parents to visit the portal in PowerSchool. So of course, you can always do that if you have access. What if a parent comes to school but opted for virtual instruction? Do we call parents? What if they say they meant to select in-person instruction? Students are not allowed to change their learning option from virtual to in-person. Students are, however, allowed to change from in-person to virtual. Originally, a parent may have selected virtual instruction. However, they are having some major technology issues. How do we handle those situations? Students should contact the school or the help desk for assistance. Okay, and at this time, we're going to turn it back over to Mr. Coleman.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. I appreciate you. Awesome job, team. Parents, thank you so very much for joining in with us this evening. I have been doing double duty, been bouncing between two meetings. We have about 50 parents over in the STEM Fest, and then with the 49 of you guys who've been over here as well too. And so I just hope that this gave clarity, much needed clarity, and ever rapid change in terms of what's happening. Keep in mind, teachers are still trying to get vaccinated. There's just so much going on. And so the biggest thing that I want to reiterate that I said earlier, safety is our number one priority. That means that students won't be moving a whole lot throughout the day. It'll be for a restroom break, and then also to get their lunch, and that'll be about it. But for the most part, we're going to stay in the same place. Every student will be using their device still. Things aren't going to look much different, but it will be a very sterile environment because we have to make sure that the staff is being clean or cleaning high touch areas to be able to make sure that we're wiping down and sanitizing to be able to make sure that we prevent any type of outbreak as some others have had. In addition to that, want to kind of make sure you know that the numbers of the parents who've elected for students to come back, that's a small percentage here for John P. Freeman. It's not a lot. And so we're thankful in that regard that parents are willing to kind of make sure that they're very cautious in trying to look at these different options between virtual and in person. And so we appreciate you there in that regard. With that being said, should you have any questions, you know you can always reach out to us at 901-416-3156. We're always here to help, and we are making sure that we keep everybody safe. Parents, I think the biggest thing that may come up as well too, parents won't even be allowed into the building for this go round unless there's some type of major emergency or a pre-planned appointment time that we have. But we try to make sure that we are very vigilant about keeping the numbers and keeping everything static. You've heard from the team where every kid's going to have to sit in the same seat every day, even when they go to lunch. And so that's how stringent we have to be in terms of this COVID-19 epidemic when we're trying to meet and trying to come back in person. I know some parents ask about athletics. Not even sure that's going to happen, given, again, the lateness of the year. We're in school until June, but keep in mind, we're going to have to test as well, too. And so we'll come back to all of that a little bit later. But I don't want to prolong the time. It is now 6:36. We're going to get ready to kind of close this out, but I can say thank you for always your willingness to meet us halfway in all that we do. And I would like to always close as I always do. I want to remind you that we are making a conscious decision to make today a great day or not, as we realize that the choice is absolutely yours. This concludes our first elementary re-entry plan meeting for parents. Thank you all, and have a great evening. This concludes the meeting.